he was so impressed with Mount Vernon, he gave him $3 grand, and he used the $3 grand to buy the sash back.
Jim, you got
Oh, so this is where Lord
that's
Fairfax
the Lord
ended
Fairfax
up.
scored for us?
Right. So, oh, here we go.
This is after the bank vault.
Yeah, this is after the bank
They
vault.
made a withdrawal from the bank.
Now, his bones were originally buried where you crossed Boscawen on the mall. They were originally buried in that. There was a church there. So they dug them out of that and put them in the basement of this church. And then they forgot about them. And this contracting company, local contracting company, had 2 black guys dig up the basement, and the one black guy had a dream of where those bones were. So they dug up these bones, but they put more than one person's bones down in that basement. And mainly, and you know, they're not really clear on their writings, but they wrote that you know, there was a leg missing. One of the legs was inside the rib cage. They wouldn't let the reporters take any pictures of it because maybe they were a little embarrassed on the condition they left old Lord Fairfax. But so we think there's still a skull and an arm and a leg, and maybe a rib bone is what his remains are. But yeah, they had to dig them up out of there. And really, literally, they so forgot that he was literally, the bones were on both sides of a wall they built down the basement. So they built the wall over where he really was. So, yeah, they weren't too careful back then. But you know what I've noticed? The closer you are to an event, it's like it's so normal to you, it doesn't like a big deal. And then the further away you get from an event, it becomes really important. Like it becomes really historical. So, you know, that's the only way I can explain why they're a little careless about maintaining things.
Just another guy that died.
Yeah, right, right. But yeah, he pretty much ran a colony inside a colony. And this was really important because he was the guy who collected the rent, not the governor of Virginia. So they literally had a whole colony that was the size of Massachusetts inside of Virginia, collecting what they call quit rent, meaning they quit bothering you once you paid the rent. Quit rent. And they, you know, they would keep bothering you. So, and Lord Fairfax was pretty decent to a lot of people that tried to make arrears and all that. But he collected the money. And then passed some on to the king, but mostly kept it himself. And Virginia collected its own quit rents. So back then, you didn't own the property really. You were renting this stuff from all these big landlords. You know, you hear about modern news like Mexico with property rights being kind of weird. Who really owns that property? The government does. This is kind of like it was for Virginia in the colonies.
One thing about the extent of his holdings, he basically owned land rights to everything in Fairfax County, Prince William County, Fauquier, I think it was north of the Rappahannock.
Yeah,
and that line, theoretically, was part of like Virginia's claim all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. But he controlled all this area out here in the valley, western Maryland, western southwest PA, which was in dispute from Virginia and Pennsylvania as to who really controlled that.
Basically overlay Massachusetts on Virginia. That's what he had. That's how big it was. So, but he was, you know, they show a portrait of him with a book. A lot of people say he didn't read, but he had a subscription to Gentleman's Quarterly. He kept in touch. And you know, he didn't write a lot, so there's not a lot of people that tell who he really was. But the more you discern what he did in England to fight all the legals for his estate and to make money, and he was high up. He was high up, Privy Council. His brother was on the Privy Council. What's the Privy Council? That's the council of advisors to the king himself. So he was high up. So he could go from high to low. He could handle all different kinds of people. you know, to make this happen. So he was rather quite adept. Lord Dunmore's army camped on his site. I bet there's a treasure trove to yet be found, you know, from that army. But his versatility in dealing with all manners of people, high and low, fascinated me. You know, to see how he could do all that. And like I say, his brother Robert was on the Privy Council, so he had some pull. And his nephew Thomas Bryan Martin, who Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Adam Stephen named Martinsburg after. Thomas Bryan Martin was his nephew, and he did a lot of the bidding. He was top dog. You went through him on anything in this proprietorship.
Let's head back to the courthouse area
Okay.
and talk about Washington's first political election here.
Okay. Sure.